This video is sponsored by Squarespace. The 2025 F1 season opener is done. We've finally seen these cars in a competitive session and we've learned a lot. The conditions may have been chaotic on Sunday, but there's still plenty we can glean from the Australian Grand Prix. So here's 5 of the most important things I think we learned. My name's Tommo, let's talk about it. The rookies are rapid. Did all of the rookies bar one have a shunt at some point during the Australian Grand Prix weekend? Yes, but let's not get it twisted, they all at some point in the weekend showed serious pace potential. Bortoletto out-qualified Hulkenberg on both their comparable laps in Q1, was running within 5 seconds of Hulk till lap 34 when Alonso had his shunt, and I'm going to use that Alonso lap 34 shunt as a reference for a lot of things in this video, right? Because everything changed after that, basically, and it all kind of changed the order. And also for Gabriel, it did seem that it was a suspension failure that caused his shunt more than anything else. That car broke before it hit the wall. All things considered, I think Bortoletto had a fantastic showing on his debut Grand Prix. Isaac Hadjar was only half a tenth off of making Q3 and a tenth and a half off of Yuki Tsunoda, consistently close throughout that qualifying session in Q1 and Q2. Of course, the race never actually started for him, but I think given the underlying pace we got a little glimpse of in qualifying, there's definitely something there, and I think Hadjar's outright pace has never really been in question. If Red Bull can harness him, then there's potentially a diamond in there, like Yuki, that needed a bit of, buffing, but gets there in the end. Jack Doohan was on course to get pretty close to Pierre in Q2, maybe even squeeze through to Q3 before Lewis's spin brought out the yellow flags that ruined his lap. And Doohan actually went faster than Pierre just in Q1, right? They were pretty close looking on pace, I thought. And yes, again, his lap 1 shunt was disappointing. He wasn't the only person to get caught out by the conditions. But you know what? That's all Doohan can do. If he can keep showing that he's got the pace to be close to Pierre, a driver he's 7 years junior to, and showcase that, hang on, actually, do I have more ceiling than Pierre? Maybe he does. Maybe he can show that. We've not seen anywhere near enough yet, but that's the only way he keeps his seat, isn't it? And from what we saw in practice and on Saturday from Jack Doohan, he's not far off. Andrea Kimi Antonelli, we did not see his raw speed on Saturday because of the damage he caused to his car to the floor. It was scraping along the floor and it was costing him tons of time down the straights. But we saw plenty of pace and plenty of performance from him on Sunday to be, without any question or doubt, given the conditions, this kid is absolute mustard. In fact, I think that was one of the most impressive Formula 1 debuts we've seen, at least in recent memory anyway. Ollie Behrman had an absolute stinker of practice, granted, and we didn't get to see him in qualifying because of the gearbox problem, but during the race in those tricky conditions up until lap 34, when things changed, he was running within about a second and a half of Esteban Ocon. We've seen him out-qualify Hulkenberg in a Haas. We've seen him do a very, very good job at jumping in last minute in a Ferrari. We didn't see it this weekend, but fortunately for him, we've had 3 Grand Prix of him already before that to look at him and be like, yeah, this kid's got it. I do think we've seen enough already to indicate that none of these rookies that are coming in, and I'm not including Liam Lawson because he's had 11 Grand Prix, are going to get battered in a Sergeant Latifi way. I really don't think that's going to happen. I think over a lap, these kids are up to speed straight away. Over a race distance, very, very, very different story. Managing these Pirellis, just being able to manage a stint where you're not pushing all the time. You've got to drive within yourself, then you've got to push at certain times. That's going to take time. But over a lap, this raw pace, these kids, I think they're really close. McLaren's advantage is real for now. Max was almost 4/10 shy of Lando in qualifying, almost 3/10 shy of Oscar. The Papaya car was able to keep its tyres alive in that final sector in a way that no other team could. Everyone was falling off relative to McLaren at the end. From a technical engineering point of view, McLaren have smashed it. And that ability to manage the tyres paid dividends in the race as well. When Max fell behind Oscar after he made his mistake, he was like 16 seconds back by lap 34. The McLaren was a cut above and seems to have a significant enough of an advantage, both in the dry conditions in qualifying on Saturday and in practice was strong, but then also in the wet and Sunday. Like for the foreseeable, you've got to be expecting McLaren 1-2s in qualifying, especially as Oscar was running Lando close, just behind him at all times, but close in quali. I do think Oscar really did hold his own in the race as well. Was he catching Lando if they'd have not done the kind of team orders, which wasn't really team orders, but kind of a little bit team orders. I still think Lando probably had a bit in reserve and was just managing from the front, even though Oscar was, you know, getting close. I don't know if he'd have got a move done. We'll never know ultimately, right? But I'm not convinced it was like Oscar was way quicker than Lando. I don't believe that at all. I think they were very, very even on Sunday. They were both running away from Max, and that kind of gap is ominous with 2026 on the horizon. It's not the same as previous years in terms of, right, teams are going to invest big to try and catch up. Where do you draw that line? Do teams look at the result in Australia? Maybe not one result in Australia, but, you know, once we've had a few Grand Prix, you might be looking at that gap, and if McLaren maintain that kind of advantage at the front, just be like, you know what, sack it off. It's not worth it, even from a Red Bull, from a Mercedes, from a Ferrari even point of view. I mean, we didn't see the best version of Ferrari. I do think it'll be closer in these remaining Grand Prix, but still McLaren definitely are the quickest team, without any question or doubt. They have the best package, and they have two impeccable drivers, you gotta say. The reason I say for now is that round 9 change to the flexi wings, the tightening up of the tolerances from Barcelona onwards. That should in theory favour Red Bull, and we saw Max almost won that race in Australia in a car that is quite comfortably slower than the McLaren right now, and certainly less compliant and not as, I wouldn't say McLaren's easy to drive. I don't know, right? Of course I don't. But the Red Bull seems particularly hard to drive. Yet Max almost finds a way to win that Grand Prix, which just shows how good he is, why he is the best driver in Formula 1 right now by a margin. But come round 9, that could smooth things towards Red Bull's favour, and McLaren really need to bank on this early season momentum in the same way that Max banked on his early season momentum last year and it paid dividends. McLaren need to do the same this year and make sure Max is the one playing catch up at the end of the year, because if you give Max even a sniff of a chance, he will go for it. And you could say in many ways that today's video sponsor, Squarespace, is like the McLaren of website builders. Not only is it the dominant force if you're looking for somewhere to build your very own beautiful online home, but I mean, go to squarespace.com right now and it looks pretty papaya to me. Squarespace gives you everything you need to offer services and get paid on time with professional on-brand invoices and online payments. And make it look stunning with cutting-edge design powered by Blueprint AI. Just pop in a few bits of basic information and bang, you are started. No experience needed and completely free to try. It's only when you want to publish your finished website live to the world that you have to pay anything. And when that time inevitably comes around, head to squarespace.com/TOMMO'S to get 10% off of your very first website or domain. Lewis has a big learning curve ahead of him. Things did not get off to the kind of start Lewis would have wanted at Ferrari. The vibes of the move were impeccable beforehand, but now it's time to get your head down and get to work. And it's not going to be easy. I do actually think in some ways it's easier for a rookie jumping in with no prior experience, no prior knowledge, and adapt and learn this new team versus Lewis, who's going to have to unlearn, 10 years at Mercedes, McLaren before that. All of these habits, all of these approaches that are going to be very, very different at Ferrari. Not just power unit, but just team culture, communication. Lewis has kind of got to start afresh, and he's said it. His dad said it as well, Anthony Hamilton. This feels like the start of a new career that is going to take time to adjust to. Now, this was a particularly chaotic weekend, not just for Lewis, but for Charles as well. Ferrari really did not perform, right? They qualified behind Albon and Tsunoda right down there in the race. Poor strategy call. Again, the communication side, some of the team radios were a bit uncomfortable listening between Lewis and his race engineer. It was a frustrating race, stuck behind Albon for a long time, which, I didn't mind, obviously. But you can imagine how that frustration didn't help the communication, which was always going to be difficult in your first Grand Prix, right? It's going to take time. And even Charles, right? Even Charles, communication-wise with Ferrari, he had his own words of wisdom for the pit wall as well. So, it's a marathon, not a sprint, as Lewis famously once said. Once we get some less chaotic Grand Prix, dry conditions, nice and calm, I think it will be better, but there is still a hell of a long way to go. Not just for Lewis, but also Ferrari really have not started this season as they would have wanted to. But I do actually have faith. I think Lewis was closer to Charles in qualifying than I was expecting him to be. Maybe this new lease of life, this new opportunity, this fresh start for Lewis has reinvigorated that dog in him that I think we lost, well, certainly last year at Mercedes. Haas have absolutely cooked it. I wasn't remotely worried about Haas after testing. Tons of laps for Esteban, 260 in total, more than any other individual driver. 457 laps from Haas in total, only one shy of Mercedes, who did the most. Haas know what they're doing. It's exactly what they did last year in testing. Plenty of laps on the board, just focusing on long runs and focusing on not rinsing their tyres after about 2 corners like they did in 2023 every race. It worked a trick from last year and they finished 7th in the Constructors, and it's not like they even ended 2024 badly. In the last 9 Grand Prix of the season, 8 of those saw at least one Haas in the points. A 7th and a 9th for Kevin and Nico respectively at Mexico was the pick of the bunch. Yet with that, they've been absolutely nowhere in Australia. They were the bottom 2 drivers in FP1, FP2 and FP3, if you're ignoring the fact that Liam Lawson couldn't turn a single lap in FP3 because he had car problems. We didn't get to gauge Ollie on his qualifying performance because he didn't do qualifying because the gearbox was broken, but Ocon was over 6.5 tenths off even getting into Q2. I mean, that's a huge gap off the back. That's what Sauber were looking at for a lot of last year, and Haas just seemed to have taken their spot as being by far the worst team. But then you thought, okay, rain on Sunday, opportunity to capitalise, the great equaliser, blah, blah, blah. Wasn't to be. They finished 13th and 14th, the last 2 cars to finish on the track, and could make 0 progression in the race. They may have been lapping within a 1.5 seconds of one another, but by lap 34, Ocon was 10 seconds behind Liam Lawson, 20 seconds behind Gabriel Bortoleto, 25 seconds behind Nico Hülkenberg. Slow in dry practice, slow in qualifying, slow in wet race. Esteban said it himself post-race, he just couldn't keep up. And Ollie was quite happy with my performance actually. I know it's just one race, but that was a truly dire competitive showing from Haas. Now look, it's not all bad, finishing low in the Constructors, banks more ATR, blah, blah, blah. But I've talked about this before. I think that the lower teams, the smaller teams, benefit more from the prize money bump that you get from finishing higher than they do from the increased ATR. What's gone wrong? I mean, if I knew the answers to that, then they'd hire me, I guess. But is it an upgrade they've bought that they don't understand? They really do seem to have taken a step backwards, which typically doesn't happen. It's more everyone else taking a step forward. Damn, with all of that testing mileage and you're that slow, yet last year you were great. I don't know, like, it's weird. I don't get it. And the problem is neither did they, seemingly. I hope they find a way to understand and upgrade and find some performance, but this season could be a real slog at Haas. Carlos Sainz made the right choice. Williams have come out the block swinging in 2025. A very, very impressive test. Quick in all conditions in Australia and able to clutch up P5 with Alex Albon. Like, come on. I'm happy with that. Of course I am. Now, granted, if Red Bull don't bodge Yuki's strategy and pit him way too late and Oscar doesn't spin, okay, it's more like a P7 on track for Alex. Still ahead of both Ferraris, who messed up, both drivers making mistakes and team. But you have to expect that they will be back firing on all cylinders in China. Less crazy conditions, I would imagine. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I think Williams have taken a step forward, but they're certainly not a top 4 team, not yet, but they're pretty close. And it bodes well because I think Carlos can look at the options he had on the table last year for who to sign with and feel vindicated that he's almost certainly, things can change, he's almost certainly made the right choice. I mean, Hülkenberg, yes, managed a P7 in the Sauber, but was running down P13 prior to Fernando's shunt. Really did benefit from a great strategy call, but ultimately that's not where the car pace is. It's almost certainly 9th quickest overall right now, and Audi is such a big unknown. We just don't know what that engine's gonna look like, whereas the Mercedes engine that's gonna be in the Williams seems like a much more known entity. There's a lot more confidence that Mercedes are gonna be able to do it again. Who knows, right? It might work out massively well for Gabriel and Nico. Time will tell, but I think Sainz will fancy his chances. Alpine did look strong in testing, and Gasly was a Q3 car doing, could have been Q3 again without Lewis's spin. And in the race, Gasly was, running top 10 reasonably comfortably. Then he obviously made his mistake, which let the Ferrari boys through. It's more the upper management, I've got to say. You've got to remember that Carlos Sainz did race for Renault in 2018. This is nothing new. I guess this isn't news, but now we've watched Drive to Survive, got a bit more of an insight into Flavio and his influence. I think Flavio's F1 needs to move on from individuals like Flavio, to be honest. And he's not the only one. Calling out a rookie for showing a bit of emotion after shunting. Helmet, please. Come on. Look, James Vowles has made no illusion that their focus is 2026 onwards, yet the building blocks are being put into place now and are already paying back somewhat. You've got Pat Fry leading a very new technical team there at Grove. You've got a lot more staff as well. They're expanding the facility, even though it's still got a brown door. I'm sure they'll change that soon enough. The way Carlos worked with the strategy team to really maximise Alex's performance, his result, I think cohesive is the word. Williams feels like a really cohesive, tight-knit team. Arguably the most cohesive team on the grid. Now, of course, if Williams start fighting for wins, that will change. The drivers will have to start, this is the McLaren challenge at the moment. Almost an impossible task to really manage that. But in their position right now, you've got to say, like, momentum-wise, I mean, having Alex out-qualify both Ferraris and Carlos getting to Q3 and outscore Ferrari in the first race, Carlos is technically upgraded. So there you go. It's just really nice to see this old name, Williams Racing, some positive momentum for the first time in what feels like, honestly, decades. Because, I mean, even the turbo hybrid era, when that started, the chassis wasn't great. It was just, they had the Mercedes power unit, and that papered over a lot of cracks in that team. Finally now, things are looking up. What else did we learn from the Australian Grand Prix ahead of China this weekend? Let me know in the comments down below. My name's Tommo. Thanks again. Have a good one. Ta-da.